Hey everyone. Today is Saturday, January 4th, 2025, and I'm Jeffrey Morgan, and this is a talk I host twice a week to discuss my experiences on the path of soul transcendence. This offering is brought to you by the Movement of Spiritual Inner Awareness with the encouragement and support of my friend John Morton, who holds the mystical traveler consciousness, the spiritual consciousness that allows us to do the work that we're doing here today. If you're new to the call, the format is simple. We're going to start by calling ourselves forward into the light, which is calling our awareness forward into the light of God that's already present. And then we're going to chant three Anai hues. Hu is an ancient name for God, and Anai invokes a quality of empathy and compassion. Then I'm going to play a video clip from my teacher, John Roger, and then I'm going to do a reading from St. John of the Cross. And then we can talk about whatever you would like. So with that, Ron Holnick, please call us forward in the light.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Lord God of all, Lord God of all, we ask just now to be filled, surrounded, and protect us with the first law of spirit, the quality of acceptance. We don't mean acceptance of our likes and dislikes. We mean acceptance, Lord, of thy will, which includes everything that is happening. And for this time together, we give our thanks and gratitude for this program. So be it.
I think you said that you enter into a place of contraction. There is no such place. We enter into the process of contracting. So, as soon as you say, I entered into a place called contracted, that means that there's literally a hell for you. But since hell is a training ground, and the place where we come to an understanding of fundamental enlightenment, then we have to look at contracted as contracting. Now, it may be that your process took 10 steps to get into it, so you went from 1 to 10, like boom, I'm contracted, and nevertheless it was a contracting process. I would take a piece of paper and start writing down from maybe the word neutral into as far as contracted as I can get verbally. Words that would keep stepping me down to the next worst consequent level. That would then allow me the choice that once something is kicked off visually, instead of it running to 30 real fast, I could knock it off at 15. but I might not be able to knock it off at 15 if I don't know there is a 15. And what it's doing, it's robbing you of the quality of your life.
Yeah.
And so therefore it's a thief. And the thief hung with the Christ. So you can't condemn it or attempt to crucify it, except you want to put it in its proper place, which said, remember me, Lord, when you come into your kingdom. So you have to go to the kingdom within real fast, which is a tremendous joyful place. And from that place, start to look at what is the process of moving this person into the kingdom with me. And most of us are waiting till we get to a better place inside of us in order to start. And then we start to forgive, or do we start wherever we are? We don't have much choice but to start where we are.
Okay, this is a reading from St. John of the Cross called I Entered the Unknown. I entered the unknown, and there I remained unknowing. All knowledge transcended. Where I entered I knew not, but seeing myself there, not knowing where, great things then made themselves known. What I sensed I cannot say, for I remained unknowing. All knowledge transcended. In this peace and purity was perfect knowledge. In profoundest solitude I understood with absolute clarity something so secret that I was left stammering. All knowledge transcended. So deep was I within, so absorbed, transported, and all senses fled, that all senses fled, and outer awareness fell away. My spirit received the gift of unknowing knowing. All knowledge transcended. He who reaches this realm loses himself. For all he once knew now is beneath his notice, and his mind so expands that he remains unknowing. All knowledge transcended. And the higher he rises, the less he knows. That is the dark cloud that shines in the night. The one who knows this always remains unknowing. All knowledge transcended. This knowing by unknowing is of such exalted power that the disputations of the learned fail to grasp it. For their knowledge does not reach to knowing by unknowing. All knowledge transcended. Of such supreme perfection is this knowledge that no faculty or method of mind can comprehend it. But he who conquers himself with this unknowing knowing will always transcend. And if you are ready to receive it, this sum of all knowledge is discovered in the deepest ecstasy of the divine essence. Goodness and grace grant us this unknowing, all knowledge transcended. There you go. That's quite a seminar in and of itself now. All right, looks like Anna Valencia is raising her hand. I can't hear you if you're talking.
There, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Thank you. Thank you. This is just a blessing for me. And I wanted to let you know from the bottom of my heart that I'm really thankful for this. I've been listening to the recordings, and it's wonderful to see how Spirit has been working with me through everything that everybody has shared. So thank you for allowing this to happen. I just have a question, which I would want to see your input in it. It's regarding reference points while on dreams or on meditations.
Mhm.
If you have anything to talk about that topic.
Yeah. So is the question kind of how how do how do you relate to those reference points in those dreams and in meditation?
Yes, like how um they're mentioned a lot, but sometimes when I'm meditating or I'm dreaming, um I don't know if it's a dream that's happening over and over, or if that becomes a reference point, or how can I get advantage of those or recognize those as
Yeah.
something uplifting.
Yeah. So I think for me, as a primary principle, I try to use the same approach, whether conscious or unconscious. And that is, I assume that that which I perceive is that which God has given me to love and serve. Now, that could be the monster in my dream, or it could be the person that bumps into me on the street, or it could be a member of my family, or it could be a part of me that's upset. Either way, if it's in my field, it means there's something to learn, there's something to love, there's something to serve.
Mhm.
And that's just my mentality. I think it's very easy because the dream carries with it often a lot of the karmas to process, whether that be emotional, and at times, in order to stimulate the appropriate reaction in your consciousness to complete a karma, an image of a person that you might have known long ago or a person that has emotional charge for you may be presented. Now, the mind will interpret that and go, well, is that a prophetic dream that I need to tell that person, or is that telling me something's wrong? And it may just be that you don't, if they showed you the image of the person you actually had the karma with in a past life, you wouldn't recognize them and it wouldn't have the required emotional and mental response in you. And therefore, it wouldn't complete the karma. So it's going to use whatever it needs to use. So I guess that comes to the second principle. The second principle for me is there are no accidents, and every particle, every molecule, every millisecond of my existence is in the hands of the mystical traveler consciousness. Now, I think people at times get it all tangled up saying, oh, well, am I in my karma, or am I on in the line of the traveler, or am I, they start worrying about that. But my experience is when we take initiation with the mystical traveler, it's as if uh, Kalnarenjan, the Lord of these lower levels, literally hands the soul over to the mystical traveler and says, this one's yours now. So it becomes a different jurisdiction. It's still an action of completion, but it's an action of completion not within a trap, but within a school that's designed to actually get you home. So the second principle is there's no accident, there's no chaos, there's no wrongness. So you may see something very upsetting, but it helps for me to understand that that which we perceive is always in service to soul transcendence when we are under the jurisdiction of the mystical traveler. And then you go, well, even that really upsetting demonic image that I saw in my dream, or the murders, or you see stuff. Some people have that karma where they have very upsetting dreams. And it's like, yes, even that, because there was a completion action that needed to take place. The tricky part about dreams and the tricky part about spiritual exercises as a context for experiencing is it covers a broad swath of possibilities. There is an intelligence orchestrating the process that I just mentioned. It's your soul, it's the mystical traveler consciousness. But what that means is there's a lot of complexity to it because sometimes you might be having a dream that's you completing a karma. Sometimes you might be having a dream where you're participating in a spiritual action or ministry on this planet or another planet. So you may be seeing images because you're doing spiritual work. Sometimes you may be working with the mystical traveler or the Christ action to liberate souls from the hells. Sometimes you might be just processing an entity that's geographically in your area. Some people have that karma where they had agreed to counsel certain disincarnate entities, so they're going to see very upsetting images, but they're just misinterpreting their role in that. A lot of people get upset, oh my God, why do all these ghosts follow me? Well, they may be following you because technically you have a responsibility to work with them. So you can resist it and run away from it, or you can just go, hey, how can I serve you? How can I love you? Is there, oh, you need a column of light? Okay, I can do that. I'll just bring in a column of light right now. Sometimes they just want you to bring in a column of light so they can walk into it. I mean, so I think it's good to pay attention and it's good to journal. It's good to watch for patterns because if you have the same dream repeatedly, it may be that you're having the same karmic test repeatedly and you're not necessarily passing it. It may be that you're not completing it or you're not seeing the truth. I'm one of these weird people that if something very upsetting happens to me, I can let go of it super, super quick if I see the truth of it. If I create a trauma around it, I could obsess over it and obsess over it and obsess over it for weeks. But then when I see the truth, then it goes away in an instant. So I have this consciousness and I'm very grateful for it. It's very uncomfortable, but my consciousness won't let things just pass into my subconscious and my unconscious without me seeing what really happened. So I don't end up holding a bunch of stuff inside of me because it's kept in this kind of purgatory until I finally, hey, stupid, this is the answer, and then I get it. And sometimes the answer is I did this thing in a past life, and now this was balancing it, so there was nothing off about it, and what was off was me judging it as wrong, and then I forgive the judgment, and then it clears. And sometimes it's a misinterpretation of a spiritual action. Oh, this had to be completed, or I agreed to do this ministry, but I created this whole mythology of my rightness and their wrongness. And that's what locked in the trauma. Sometimes the dream is where we process that which the consciousness in its everlasting mercy will not let us just pass into the unknowable realms. It won't let us into the unconscious, into those levels of veiled reality where it's harder to process. Sometimes the consciousness and its mercy holds it present so that you can process it in the sleep state because you're refusing to process it in the awake state. Sometimes a dream is just a reproduction of all the energies you took in that day that you didn't clear, and then you go ahead and clear it and complete it in the sleep state. You see, so the possibilities are endless. And as much as I could say it's pure and simple, when you're doing spiritual exercise, you chant your tone and you chant the name of God, and then you enter the sound current, and it's like that, and then you're in the soul realm. It's not always like that. Sometimes chanting your tone and doing spiritual exercises is like running on a hamster wheel to build up electricity in some storage unit somewhere. And then all of a sudden, when you're in sleep, is when you start seeing these amazing images in different realms, or you find yourself at the doors of a great temple and realize that you were brought by the mystical traveler to a mystery school to study with a teacher or ascended master. And sometimes you do SCs, and as quickly as you close your eyes, you're walking in the spiritual realms and you don't even know where you are. And sometimes you close your eyes and all of a sudden you open them and you realize you've been in spiritual exercises for 45 minutes and then you go, did I fall asleep? But the truth is, yeah, you in a sense you lost conscious reference here. So you could say it's like sleep. And if you have a wearable or electronic device, it might think you're asleep. But if you're like me, you know the difference in quality between sleep and spiritual exercises. There are SZs, there are spiritual sleeps, if you will. But then there's sometimes you just lose consciousness and lose reference point and go into a place where sense perception and memory just can't be taken back. And so it feels like you went into a great void for a period of time and then came back. And you go, oh, did I sleep? What was the point of that? But you may feel really regenerated, really healed in that. I think that a lot of the reference points we're given by John Roger are very merciful. It's very sweet because otherwise you'd think you're crazy. You start hearing the surf, or you start hearing uh, a bell, or you start hearing trickling water, or you start hearing bees buzzing, or the quaking asps. You know, you're gonna start thinking you're nuts. But thank God he gave you all these, like, if you see this color, if you hear this sound, if this other thing happens, it's like, yeah, that's fine. That's normal. I think that in my own sensitivity and intuition, my definition of normal, it's not as if the world accommodated my preferences so much as my definition of ordinary and normal became very large and encompassed a lot of stuff. And maybe that's something like what acceptance really means for me. Acceptance is growing and enhancing your definition of normal and ordinary so that everything seems like it's in its right place. Even the visions, even the this, even the that. But for me, the key to stay out of trouble with all this stuff is avoiding the story. Treat the story as a symptom. Treat the story as something to clear. When we have experiences spiritually, we need no justification or rationalization. It just is what it is. You don't need to mental your way into solving it. You don't need to fix it. You don't need to, all you need to do is love it. And sometimes that means not understanding what's going on. It's like the reading I did just before we started talking. It's very much getting into that, what John Roger calls the divine unknowing. And it may not make a lot of sense, but it has such beauty to it. And in the end, I feel so grateful that I don't understand what's going on. Thank God. Thank God there's divine intelligence that is orchestrating all of this so that I don't have to. And all I need to do is put one foot in front of the other and love the one in front of me.
Is is there any way, so you said anything could happen, so maybe it's not always processes of things that are coming in, but also things that are going out, like,
Correct. It's completions, it's
okay.
releases, it's a system. It is super useful. There's a
Okay.
lot that happens for your physical body, there's a lot that happens for your brain, there's a lot that happens for your energy. Sleep is a deep well of great gifts.
Thank you.
And be aware you can always write to the traveler as well if you have experiences that you think have to do with your initiation or of a more spiritual nature.
Are okay, even if, like, we're supposed to be on our own or things like that, like, I mean,
What do
like,
you mean?
after certain level, like, they don't have to anchor anything, so
You're saying when you're a soul initiate and things like
yeah,
that?
like, you finished the physical anchoring of the tones.
I received my soul initiation very, very early in life, and I still ask for help from the traveler, whether it's the physical traveler, maybe for me, my reference point for the traveler inside of me, because of my relationship to that, is John Roger. So I'm always asking John Roger for help. I think that admitting my incompetence is usually a very, very good strategy.
So you mean
So it's
contacting
just
them, not actually like physically writing, but like
so
contacting them.
I think you have options, right? You
Okay.
contact the mystical traveler inside of you. That's a great source because that's where it was anyway, called the
Yeah.
Inner Master. I think there's also writing a letter and then burning it. That's another way. But if you actually want response from a physical, living, breathing human body that's a person, you can write to John Morton
Okay.
as well. And maybe somebody can put that email address. You probably have it.
Yeah, I do.
But that's great. And honestly, sometimes the second you write to somebody holding that consciousness, or the second, I mean, it
Mhm.
the thing will may move and you may get the answer. And you might write to the correspondence person and say, hey, don't, I know you're busy. Don't worry about this letter. I got my answer. You are only ever working with yourself anyway.
Mm.
Thank God.
Yes.
But there's never a second that I pretend to know. I mean, I guess in my stupidity, I might act like I know something, but I'm always asking for help from the beloved within me. I, being in this body, even someone who's holding or who's being held by or operated by a master consciousness still has to deal with the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. I have such incredible compassion for everybody. Having a body and being on this level is not easy. And I just would love to get to a place where I don't need to judge anyone, or more importantly, judge myself. Because it really, remember there was a quote, be kind for everyone is fighting a great battle, or something like that. Maybe someone could find it. I think it's falsely attributed to several different folks, but it was some preacher or something. Nonetheless, if you take nothing from this exchange other than this, please just love yourself and be gentle with yourself, like I would be with you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Susan, I don't hear you right now.
There we go. I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Hi, Jeffrey.
Hi.
Oh, so the quote, the JR at the beginning was so perfect for what I've been experiencing. Um, I broke my leg in September, and the visual I had for it was I was like a bowling pin, and a person who caught up in a wave was the bowling ball that hit me. So it knocked me over. The person hit me in the shins and knocked me over and broke my leg. And
That
I,
was in you were in the ocean when this happened?
yeah, I was standing about knee deep in the water.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it was really
That's an interesting
random.
story.
It isn't
Yeah.
it? And
Yeah.
so from early on, I was asking myself, okay, so if universe is truly conspiring in my favor, how is this that? Or how can I relate to this as that? And I have it opened up a ability to see the possibility of what it's been for me. Largely time to go within, time to consider a change in my work. But what I'm finding is that so much fear is coming up as I'm considering the changes, the
Yeah.
contraction that JR talked about. It's almost as if I feel like I made a mistake at some point in some lifetime that was so grave. I don't know if I'm making this up, but the level of fear that comes up is beyond anything that I can explain in this lifetime. So I don't know. Maybe this is all a story I'm making up, but I thought I'd bring it to you, and because it's almost to the point where I'm wanting to move into dreams or an area in my life that I really want to move into, but I'm finding I'm getting in my own way so much that I'm finding it challenging.
Yeah. I was going to say a lot of times the mind will find the most convenient explanation for the feelings that we have.
Okay.
And I find that to be a great distraction. That's why I learned a long time ago when I would work with clients, um, usually if they told me what they thought it was, I would go the opposite direction because most of the time there's when we're in a karmic pattern, there seems to be a kind of immune system of the karma.
Hmm.
Much in the way, come to think of it, the negative power, the what we call the loyal forces of the opposition, I've noticed that they don't function necessarily in againstness. They function more like white blood cells within a body where it's trying to expel or control an anomaly or a foreign influence.
Hmm.
So it's less as much that we're against anything because I don't think working in the field of the traveler we are against anything because the traveler consciousness runs through all and all runs through the traveler consciousness and there's no separation. Um, at the same time, it's less as much that the negative power seeks to harm us or against us. It's more like we're doing something that's out of sync with the system that was set up by the call power. And the system that was set up is cycles. The system that was set up was an evolutionary plan. And the system that was set up was largely deterministic and devoid of choice. One of the most beautiful gifts I think the Christ consciousness anchoring on the planet has given us is a greater degree of choice. Um, a lot of what will happen is the fear that comes forward will be, see, we'll think of fear from the story of identity. So we'll say, I am afraid because this will happen to me, or I am afraid if I do this, this will happen to me. When I've actually worked with people, largely what they have identified as that causal relationship is in fact simply a disalignment between the system that is set up of consciousness and the energy field and consciousness that is coming forward for that next phase, whatever that may be. So it becomes less about this one being, this person being afraid of a something that will happen to them. And it more becomes like the costume you're wearing, being afraid of no longer matching the party you're attending. So the obvious solution is take it off, right? Take off the costume. So that process for me is a process of resonating at a more essential level of my expression. I've often heard the metaphor of personal growth work where people talk about how somebody asked Michelangelo, how did you carve this beautiful David out of the statue? And he said, I just chiseled away everything that wasn't David. But the type of work I'm talking about, which I've talked about on this talk, so if you've already heard this, just act surprised. But like it's more like a golden David
Hmm.
is trapped within a block of marble, and somebody with a big T on their t-shirt holds a big tuning fork above the marble, and that tuning fork is at the resonant frequency of the gold. Okay. And it hits the tuning fork. That person hits the tuning fork. And so the gold starts shaking violently. And as it shakes, the cracks begin to form in the marble, and more tends to fall away.
Mm.
So it becomes less about trying to solve or resolve the outer layer and more about how to enhance the amplitude and intensity of that inner sound. Put another way, if you're in a crowd full of people so loud that you can't hear your own voice, is it easier for you to get 1,000 people to shut up? Or is it easier for you to speak louder so you can hear your own voice? I've often found that the latter is much more effective. There's a beautiful poem by Mary Oliver called The Journey that reminds me very much of this exact phenomena. But she has a very peculiar line. I'm just going to pull it up because I love it, and why not? But she said, "But little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds, and there was a new voice which you slowly recognized as your own, that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save." It's an extraordinary poem. There is a way in which convergent moments like a leg break complete a karma.
Mm.
There is, let's say, a penumbra or a shadow left or an impression left by a karma, which oftentimes people will think they're still in something when they're actually free of it.
Mm.
It's like if you spent your entire life driving a golf cart and all of a sudden you have a Ferrari and you find you're driving it like a golf cart because that's your reference point. How would you know? How would you know the difference? If there's only one gear in the golf cart and there's six gears in you're just going to be in first gear, kind of going 15 miles an hour, chilling really loudly, I guess. But you see that point where when a leg break can be a completion of a very, very old karma that has inhibited an authentic expression of yourself. Now, your mind's going to say, what did I do wrong for this to happen? But the leg break, more often than not, is an answer to a prayer. When you were young and you said, I just wish my voice mattered. I just wish what was true for me could be the truth, rather than me having to subscribe to the structures and all of the rules that I was given and all the perfecting of self that you did, self with a lowercase s, to try and fit the mold that you were given, and all the things that you did that compromised your integrity, not in the sense of lying, cheating, or stealing, but in not being true to yourself just to accommodate others' preferences.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you break your leg and that's done.
Mm.
And then your spirit says, hey, we paid our debt. It's time to live solically. It's time to live as who we truly are. That's over now. It's okay if the tears come
They're
because
here.
you know what I'm saying is true.
Yeah.
And that process of embracing yourself with a capital S is one of the greatest gifts that can be experienced in this life
Yeah.
for the conscious self. The greatest of the greatest gifts is spiritual exercises and being with the traveler.
Yeah.
But to live in integrity and in complete alignment with our unique soulic expression on this planet, as God speaking through us, as God living through us, as God seeing through us, is such a precious gift.
Yeah.
And it is scary for the part of us that has been small. It is scary for the part of us that has comfort in the golf cart of things.
Yeah.
It seems to me you're completely on track. It just seems that you are learning a valuable lesson in what the mind can and can't do for you. The mind is great at organizing information. It's great at processing stuff and finding causality for things, which is super useful when you're looking for your keys in your house.
Something.
Not so useful when you're trying to find who you truly are inside. What is so is so. If the energy of spirit is moving through you, it needs no justification. It needs no explanation. What is so is so. And it's going to be an expression of the heart, not of the emotional heart, not of the emotional heart, and not of the attachments of relationships or family, but of the heart that knows in the peace that surpasses understanding a truth that comes through you as if it was embracing every cell of your body. And it doesn't require any justification or basculation. You've been working to hone a keen mind that can find explanations for things and justify things and keep you out of trouble. But that's not the tool that is best suited for the work that we're doing here. You don't need a chisel, you need a tuning fork.
Mm. Yeah.
You got it?
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
Enjoy.
All right. Thank you so much.
Like them.
All right. God bless you. Okay. Donna Day.
Jeffrey and everybody else. Hi. Um, it's great to be here. And my husband and I have been having so much enjoyment of listening to you every Saturday. And we've introduced two new friends to this and gave them discourses for Christmas, and they're watching as well, which is pretty
Amazing.
exciting. Yeah. Um, I have a question, Jeffrey. I have a very long-term relationship with a friend that's been both very wonderful and also very complicated. Um,
That's the best
we,
kind.
yeah, I worked with this person for about 17 years, so I was around them every day pretty much, and we became super close friends. Um, and then I don't know, after 25 years or something, we had an unresolvable issue, and we separated for about 10 years. And then we got back together about a year ago, and now we're having a somewhat similar unresolvable or somewhat similar difficult issue, communication issue. And I have been told by John Roger and other people that I have a lot of karma with this particular person, this girlfriend of mine. And
Nice.
that we've had every kind of relationship you can imagine throughout lifetimes. And so I've been grappling with, I've always thought that if you have karma with a person that you love, a friend or someone that you love and care about, I've always thought that the way to complete that kind of karma is to make the relationship work well. And
Really?
yeah, I think I'm going to need a little auto correction on that. But I mean, from you, but I think it's because of the way that I grew up, and my parents had an extremely nasty, hostile, breaking up divorce, and I was a 10-year-old with no one around except a very damaged mother. And so I was, walking on eggshells for a few years from probably age 10 to 13, and maybe forever since in some way. But unfortunately, this friend of mine, I think she falls into my mother's bucket, so to speak. And so
Hmm.
my situation is that I feel like I'm always walking on eggshells, and I don't do this to this extent with other friendships, but it's a really pronounced situation. And so I've had a lot of therapists and different people tell me, this isn't so healthy. This relationship isn't so healthy for you, and maybe the best thing to do would be to end it. And I can only
Therapists are awesome.
I know because of all my background in MSIA and everything. If I've never even wanted to ever end any relationship, and I think it was just trying to correct what my parents did in some way. Like they did it so bad that I've been spending my life trying to learn how to resolve conflicts and communication problems, and I've got a lot of tools, but sometimes even all those don't really work. So what I'm wondering about is there what are the possible karmas for dealing with a relationship where
You know,
you're not on the same wavelength, and you can't communicate about issues between the two of you. You can talk about anything else, but issues between the two people it always end up in some pain and hurt on both sides, really.
so I'm gonna share some observations. I'm not gonna answer your question because I think the framing of the question might be the problem.
Okay.
So there's a couple of assumptions. First, I think we only have karma with ourselves. I mean, that's my experience. And all relationships are inside of us. So your real issue is with the friend inside of you, which means you can work that process right now. Even if you're not talking for 10 years, even if any of that stuff, you could just be working it with them until it's real peaceful in there inside of you. I don't think it's about healthy or not healthy. I know, like this is my very radical, like I'm gonna get some angry letters from somebody, but I I'm a sucker for the beauty and perfection of karma. And I love those messy relationships. And honestly, if we stare at anybody long enough, something will annoy us about them. That's what it is to be human. That's why John Roger talks about relationships being healthy when we're looking in the same direction. And if you're looking at each other, yeah, of course, you're going to find stuff you don't like. And the stuff you don't like is probably just stuff you don't like about yourself that's being reflected to you through their behavior, through their actions. For me, none of that stuff ever got me anywhere. Like trying to understand it, trying to fix it, trying to none of that. But loving the person for no reason, loving the person unreasonably, that's got me pretty far. That's been beautiful, which is I realized it doesn't have to make sense. The person can be a total jerk, and I can love them also in their jerkness. And I can love the jerk in me, and that even feels better. So that's one piece of it. The second piece is the way you describe your life seems to remove, like when you talked about when you were 10 and the whole thing, why wouldn't you acknowledge the presence of the mystical traveler and the Christ? If you're working with the mystical traveler and the Christ, that was already decided before you were born. So what makes you think that you were a kid there alone and you weren't being guided and held the entire time? And yet you describe, oh, I was alone and I was this and this happened here and the divorce was terrible. And that all may be true and it can still be healed right now. You could bring your parents into your consciousness right now and just watch them get healed by the Spirit. You see? But the way you're describing it has this commitment to the story. It has this commitment to this is how it was built, and this is why I'm damaged, and this is why I have this dysfunction, and I've made this woman my mother, and I don't know. I don't know about all that. Maybe you just have a lot of fun karma with this person inside of yourself, and that's such a beautiful teacher. And I don't know if you have to see, I don't. when I've tried to make relationships work, I've really kind of messed it up most of the time, to be honest. And maybe that's a me issue. Maybe I'm just uniquely gifted at screwing stuff up. But I don't know if it's about making stuff work. I think it's just about clearing and releasing blocks to loving and just knowing that second adage. So all relationships are inside of us, and quote, there's no excuse to withhold our loving. That is absolutely essential. So if there's a part of you that withholds loving because she's super unreasonable and said this thing and you know you're off track anyway. It's not about her, it's about you. Why would you stand for junk being in the river of your loving? It's just you clear that and then there's a loving that is so vast and so big that even if somebody's ridiculous, you love them in their ridiculousness. You find it cute and entertaining. And I would really look because I confront this all the time, and Lord knows I can make such a convincing legal argument for my position in almost any situation. I just have to watch it because my mind is so good at that. I mean, I became a lawyer and then didn't want to really be a lawyer, so here I am with this capacity to do this stuff, and I don't really like it that much. It's just this realization I need to be okay with and accept how I am. But this capacity in me to create arguments gets in the way. It gets in the way because I can always win the argument in my mind, but I'm no freer than I was when I first started the process. See, for me, freedom is loving all parts of me and having freedom of movement. There is no unlovable part of me. So I look at that, and there's a way that our attitude, see, we look at conflict in relationship as a defect rather than a feature. You see what I'm saying? We look at conflict in relationship and go, oh, there must be something I'm doing wrong. There must be something we're doing wrong because good relationships don't have conflict. That's not my experience at all. I used to think stuff like that because my parents got divorced too, and they used to fight and throw pillows and stuff, and I didn't like it. Fine, you know? There's a lot of things I don't like in the world. Preference is fine to have. My experience, though, is that argument is good if it's done in loving, if it's done with a loving intention, if it's done with an intention to get free, if it's done with personal responsibility. If you try to go with the level of the mind, you're just going to dig yourself into a bigger hole. But if you go to your friend and you say, hey, I just want to clear the air between us so there's nothing but loving. And I notice that I have some blocks to that. Could you be a support to me while I clear my blocks? So, see, I haven't put anything on them. I haven't done anything with that. I've just said, I know that I've got a plank in my eye. So I'm not going to go after the splinter in your eye. I'm going to go ahead and start with the plank in my eye. You kind of get what I'm saying? Or rather, what Jesus was saying. But nonetheless, there is an opportunity for us to create that safety first in our hearts. The conflict exists only at the level of the mind. I've never found a conflict between friends that wasn't a lover's quarrel. And it could be the most ugly conflict in the world because underneath all of that, both of those people are thirsting for that knowing that God loves them, that knowing that they are the love of God. And if you can have that in the back of your consciousness and go, look, I know this is the lover's quarrel, and I'm going to have fun while we do this. And I just would love your assistance getting the plank out of my eye because I really want to see you clearly and love you and see you with the eyes of Christ. But if you have that intent, not the intent to be right, to me, forgiveness is less about grammar and more about deciding that loving is the most important experience for me on the planet, that I would not sacrifice my loving for anyone or anything. And it's having that ruthlessness that says, if, what is it, if your left arm offend you, cut it off or something like that. It's like having that ruthlessness that says, I'm never going to let anything get in the way of my loving, not because of what everybody else does. And if we can come to the conversation with that attitude of, thank you for bringing this to my attention. I didn't know that I was triggered by this. I didn't know that I had something to clear on this, but you're such a keen bloodhound. You went ahead and brought me this juicy thing to get me free. I didn't even know I had that to work on, but now I do. Thank God. How else would you have found it? You never would have found it. We grow through that process. We don't necessarily grow through smooth sailing. And my experience as the mystical traveler makes sure that we're not particularly comfortable here so that we don't grow roots and stick around. This is all just a pit stop on the pilgrim's trail home to the heart of God.
Okay. Thank you.
There you go. All right.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Well, folks, I have a couple quick announcements before we call it a day. The first is please check the emails that you get. And uh, when we give reminder emails, sometimes we talk about hours changing. So, for example, I missed the last 2 Tuesdays because it was Christmas Eve and then New Year's Eve, and I wanted to be respectful of those holidays for myself and others. So that's one thing. Please make sure you check the reminder emails because sometimes they'll actually say something that you may not know. So that's number one. Number two, there's still time to register for the spiritual alchemist class that I'm doing with Paul K. I believe it starts January 13th. So Paul does amazing, fun research and finds a lot of fun facts. I do whatever it is the heck I do. Who knows? But at the end of the day, it'll be a lot of fun and a good way to spend Monday nights. So if you haven't registered and you feel like it, go for it. I think there should be a link that was posted. And then, yeah, I think that's it. Love you all. The blessings already are. Thank you for
Love
being
you
here.
too so much.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Thanks so much.